Welcome to CISOonline Pennsylvania, a value-packed 30-minute webinar brought to you live by CXO Sync. I'm your host and moderator, Joseph Wolfgram, and for those of you who I'm meeting for the first time, allow me to share a little background about myself. I'm a 35-year veteran of the IT industry, turned professional speaker and podcast host, and recently became a consulting healthcare CTO. I'm hosting this event today from the beautiful city of Venice, Florida, but most of the year I'm traveling throughout the United States in a motorhome with my wife, 4 cats, and a dog. So, from my home base, which is all across America, I'm honored to be here with all of you today. In just a moment, we're going to kick it off with our expert panelists here on our virtual stage. But first, I want to mention that our program today is sponsored by Proofpoint, and we are honored to have their resident Chief Information Security Officer, Lucia Milica, join us for the second half of today's broadcast. We all know Proofpoint as the provider of the most effective cybersecurity and compliance solutions to protect people on every channel, including email, the web, the cloud, and social media. We certainly want to thank them for making this show possible for all of us here today. Now, let's get the stage set for the infamous CISO Predictions Panel. Joining me on stage today are some of the industry's top thought leaders in information and cybersecurity. Let's begin by introducing Philip Ikenaga, CISO with St. Joseph's University. Philip? There we go. Hey, Philip. Welcome to the stage. Now, Philip has over 20 years in the information security business, currently at St. Joseph's University for the past 2.5 years. But what I love about Philip's background is for the past 19 years, he has volunteered at Happiness is Camping, a summer camp for children that happen to have cancer. Philip, that has got to be a very rewarding way to spend your time.
It is. It's probably the best thing I've ever done. No offense to work, but
I can't imagine. The rewards must be tremendous. Thank you for doing that. I love to see that kind of volunteer work on somebody's resume. Next up on stage, I want to introduce Steve Urich, CISO with Penn National Insurance. Steve, come on stage.
Hello, good morning.
Welcome, welcome. Good morning. Steve also has more than 20 years experience in IT as a network engineer, a technology architect, a support services leader, and CISO roles for the Department of Labor and Industry, as well as with Penn National Insurance for the past 1.5 years or so. Now, I noticed that you completed your undergraduate and master's degrees at Penn State, but that you, like me, have your bachelor's in psychology. Do you think that's been an advantage in your CISO career?
I think it has, actually, surprisingly enough. It's very applicable, especially when you consider around the security awareness program and the behaviors that we try and instill. To have that background and that knowledge, I think it's played very well long term.
Oh, yeah.
I did not plan that when I went to school for my bachelor's for psychology, but
me either, and it has turned out to be quite an advantageous degree to have, actually. So welcome to the stage. Finally, Donna Ross, our CISO with Radian. Welcome to the stage, Donna. Let me tell you a little about Donna's career as she's coming in us. Hey, welcome. Good to see you this morning.
Thank you.
Now, Donna's career spans, 3 decades or so with organizations like Prudential, GMAC Mortgage, and Corning. She's been with Radian for the past 4 years as their Chief Information Security Officer, and she serves on several boards, including the CISO Executive Network, InfraGard, and Secure World Philadelphia. But most interesting to me, anyway, is her board seat on the Anna Crucis Women's Choir. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. I think one of the things I like about being part of the Annas is they use their music as a voice for change. And I think it's an interesting way to drive change through art.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, thank you for your volunteer work there. That's fantastic. Actually, your board position there. I want to just give a big thank you to each of our panelists for joining us here to stage. And I also want to thank every one of our attendees for joining today. You're here to gain valuable insight and knowledge, but not just as a listener. We invite you to ask questions and to get interactive with us here on the panel today. So on the right side of your screen, you can see options to chat, submit questions for the panel, and vote in our poll, where you'll get to crown one of the panelists as the Pennsylvania IT Psychic. That's hashtag IT Psychic for you social media fans out there. Now, let's get the program underway. We have asked each of our panelists to gaze into their crystal ball and look ahead over the next 6 to 12 months and make a prediction about what they see is in store for our industry. You're going to decide which prediction you believe is most likely to come true when you vote in our poll later on. Philip, let's kick it off with you. What's your prediction?
So I know this might be a little bit of a softball one, but working differently. And I don't mean short term, because we're all doing that now, obviously. But I think long term, approaching work differently, not just in security and IT, but overall. You know, I've had peers in the industry say, for example, that after this, you know, when things start to go back to normal, they're instructed to have a third of their folks still remain off-site for various reasons. So, you know, I think examples like that, they're going to be long-term changes that have come from this pandemic.
Oh, absolutely. And let me tell you, that's not the first time I've heard that prediction. So how would we summarize that prediction for our polls today?
I think just working differently.
Working differently.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to call it how about a permanent change in cloud remote work? Does that work?
That's fine. Sure.
All right.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you for the prediction. Now, Steve, we'll turn to you and ask us to enlighten us with your prediction.
I agree with Philip entirely. And along those same lines, while we always had, and I'm sure lots of other organizations as well, work from home, telework, remote workers, now we have an organization, 99% of our employees are working from home. And I know that we are planning to continue this even regardless of how the governors and the various states we operate in decide when to reopen, because it has been effective to date. So what I see changing is an expectation. We're going to be pushing the boundaries of where IT security needs to cover. Now that we have increased the number of folks on an ongoing basis, we have a much higher likelihood of the risks that existed with that type of work of occurring now and coming to fruition. Mm-hmm. So in the past, you know, we all have users that connect through VPN. We have users that will use personal devices for SaaS access or to access VDIs or Citrix apps. But we rely now for operational and security on home networks that in the past we've never truly had to take into account, and at least too deeply within the risk management framework. So if you have 10 underwriters in our organization and one of them goes down for a week due to an internal home network virus, now it's 10% reduction in operational output for the organization. Mm-hmm. So what I'm thinking is the old IT mantra, something I've seen in the past and we use today for teleworkers, is best effort. So you give your best effort to help configure users who are having trouble remotely connecting. And my expectation is that's going to extend out to security here in the near future, whether it be just through education and awareness, something we've been focusing on, or possibly even some means of assuring compliance, making certain that devices are up to date, whether you do posturing with network security access or network access controls, or some other means to ensure that they've met minimum requirements at home in order to continue working in that environment. So there's lots of things that can be taken into account, and I won't say I know exactly how or what that looks like, but I believe that's where we're headed, is we're going to be asked to take a larger role in that, something we weren't really given that as a task in the past.
Yeah, and it wasn't that long ago that home networks weren't even allowed to interface with the corporate or the enterprise network, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is the new expectation is that we're going to have to figure out how to secure the home office for a lot of users.
Yeah, because again, not only the operational, but then your confidentiality and your access and passwords. There's so many things that could go wrong that on a smaller scale didn't seem as higher risk, but when you do it across broad parts of the workforce, in our case, almost 99%, that risk increased exponentially. Yeah,
well,
I haven't brought it up to my CIO yet, but I'm fairly certain it's going to come down the pipes very soon.
Good way to anticipate, right?
Yes.
I think that's an excellent prediction as well. Thank you for sharing it. Donna, what's your prediction?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm going to stay in line with what we've heard, but a little bit different take on it. So I think what we learned through this crisis is it's less about remote work and it's more virtual work. And I think the whole environment's going to change. It's not going to be working in the office versus working at home. It's going to be work from anywhere. So think of this ubiquitous environment where I could be anywhere in the universe, but I still have to do my job. So I think for us as security professionals, we need to focus now more than ever on being an enabler for the business, because that's our core mission. And as staffing changes and as where they work changes, think about how we can act differently, not just in our tools and techniques that we use to protect the company, but in how we educate this new workforce. Because when you're in the office, you have a different mindset about what you're going to click on and what site you're going to go to. But when you're sitting in a lounge chair on a beach somewhere at your vacation home, or if you're working somewhere that's not your typical office, your mindset is different. So we CISOs have to really think about how to change that mindset. So when folks are plugged in, that they understand the mission and that we give them the right tools and techniques to be successful, regardless of where they are, what device they're on, whether they're on an iPad, iPhone, the corporate laptop, their virtual desktop. So I think that's going to be really a big part of it. And I think in line with that, as we all shift to this new norm of work from anywhere, not work from home or work from the office, I think you're going to see a change in the regulatory environment. And I think there's going to be long-term privacy impacts and how folks are looking at work. I know, even if you talked about something like underwriting, in the past, they might have been the only person working from home, in your company, but now everybody's working from home. Typical tasks that your customer said, oh no, they must be in the commercial space. So I think we're going to see a drive in how we employ people, a drive in where they work from, and a big change in our overall regulatory environment and how our customers look at that as well.
Yeah, well said. And I like your thought on how people's mindset or psychology is different depending on where they are. And there might be a lot more overlap of personal things, entertainment things, research, and direct work activity going on that same device over that same channel. It's really going to create some challenges. But I'm hearing you say that this new hybrid work environment is going to require security as an enabler. Is that a good way to summarize the prediction?
Absolutely.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you for those predictions and talking a little bit about why you've chosen that. Now, everyone in the audience can now consider which prediction is the one they think is most likely to come true, because you get to vote for your favorite prediction in the polls tab of the information panel on the right side of your screen. While we allow some time for voting to get set up and votes to come pouring in, let's invite Lucia onto the stage for some insights from the CISO's office at Proofpoint. Lucia is going to be on stage here shortly. Let's see. Any minute now. Let me tell you a little bit about Lucia. She has a long career in IT and security and has even co-founded an organization called Women MBA Connect in the Bay Area. She's on the advisory boards of New Cloud Networks, Journey, and the Center for Information Technology Innovation at the University of Colorado Denver Business School. Currently, Lucia is the resident CISO at Proofpoint, and she's joining us today from Denver, Colorado. Am I right?
That is correct. Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the virtual stage, Lucia. Let's begin with seeing what your prediction is. Look into your crystal ball over the next 6 to 12 months and tell us what you see is going to happen.
So it's interesting to hear the theme of people in all the different conversations. So my prediction is that we're going to see an overdue shift to people-centric security. With COVID, we've seen a move to cloud has been accelerated across the board by many organizations. A lot of CISOs are rethinking the physical security. A lot of infrastructure projects are being put on hold. But look, the reality is, and it's been one of my huge belief is that security is not a technology challenge. If that was a technology challenge, we would have fixed this a long time ago. Security is a people challenge, and really they're the new enterprise edge. So cybersecurity is no surprise to anybody on this call that, it's a really complex system. And we're going to see an increase of systemic problems around security unless we start putting people first and start looking at security at people as the new enterprise age. Absolutely.
Well said. Now, we know Proofpoint helps companies around the world stop targeted threats and to safeguard their data. What are the threats you're seeing targeting your customers right now?
So Joe, look, we're privileged at Proofpoint to secure about 80% of the Fortune 100 on a global basis, which it's important because we really get insight into literally billions of targeted threats a day. The threat landscape has fundamentally shifted from the past few years. Attacks have been targeting people, not infrastructure, and the move to the cloud has intensified that trend. Threats today are not only targeting people, but they are activated by people. Attackers are relying on users to click, to take action, to do the work for them. Nearly 100% of attacks require human activation. And if you really look at the threat landscape, you'll see that, in general, what they're doing are things like downloaders, stealers, corporate credential phishing, et cetera. And if you're looking at how they're doing it, you will not be surprised to see little to no actual CVEs on across the board. You have some Office VBA macros, PowerShell, but it's really looking primarily at social engineering, threat hijacking, etc.
Sure.
And the other part, so I mentioned that as users shift to the cloud, attackers and threats naturally follow. So we've seen a lot of the brute force attack on cloud services that are continuing across the board. Attacks regularly jump when credential dumps become available, as you can imagine. We've also seen that automation of brute force attack using tools like Python and PowerShell are increasing across the board. And lastly, really, attackers are always continuing to innovate. The same way we're trying to stop, they're continuing to innovate. And about 53.7 or 54% of malicious URL are really from legitimate file shares.
Wow, that's amazing and scary statistics. It's always a kind of a little unnerving when we get talking about the in-depth security conversations. But I've got a question coming in from the audience. I'll throw this out to you, Lucia, and to the panel. They're wondering, how does the work from home model fit in the compliance frameworks? Anybody want to take a go at that one?
So I can take a stab at it. So my opinion is it's looking at your environment across the board, right? So we're putting in, it's all about adaptive controls, understanding, what are the needs for users to continue to doing their jobs, but really starting to building your environment with people-centric first, understanding that, yes, they may be connecting to you via their home laptops or computer laptops, etc. Right? If starting out with the data, if we think about across the board, right, you typically will look at technology, but attackers are leveraging people and technology to get to data, right? So start looking at where's your data. How do you, safeguard that first, adding in the right adaptive controls to protect it, protect people against themselves. So things like sandboxing and URL protections have been extremely helpful for many customers in making sure that they just take the guess out of the equation and removing the capability for users to just automatically click on a malicious URL. So I'll pause here, see if the panels have any add-on.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the one reminder I would add is that compliance and security are not the same thing. So compliance is a very low bar. And when I look at compliance frameworks, I look at them as a gauge, for that lowest bar. So I think for us as security officers, to Lucia's point, that we put controls in place to ensure compliance, but that's not the high watermark at all. And we continue to do more than that to protect the company. So for most companies, we use a mix of different compliance frameworks and do a best in breed approach, and then, really go above that line. Because again, compliance is not the same as security, and frameworks are just a guideline.
Excellent point, Donna. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm wondering, back to Lucia for a moment, what are some of the top tactics the threat actors are using right now that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so more and more targeted campaigns. So, threats are low volume, highly customized, highly targeted compared to what we've seen in the past, which was more, broader spray and pray. Our threat research is, of course, COVID has been the theme that we've seen across the board since January of this year. Threat actors have launched coronavirus campaigns to spread, rats, keyloggers, information stealers, and bankers. We're seeing credential phishing campaigns with this theme as well. For example, I've observed some attempts to harvest credentials for DocuSign, Facebook, OWA, OneDrive, as well as university around the world. There have been also some key BEC attacks with subjects like people tested positive downtown, so I can't go out right now. Can you please, do this, take care of this wire transfer, etc. Just recently, actually, so in May, the last couple of weeks, our threat research team found the spread of the lemon tree backdoor. So since April, we've seen several campaigns attempting to spread this backdoor. These campaigns really range from a handful of messages or a handful of customers to 200 messages and roughly about 40 customers. So still not very large, fairly small. But what the infection chain for this is, you get a phishing email that has a Microsoft Word RTF file, which include a CVE 2017. It's an OLE object. But really from that point, what it does, you go to, lemon tree, it spreads out between PowerShell backdoors, Mimikat, which is a credential harvesting tool, scanning system vulnerabilities for Eternal Blue, brute force attack on SQL servers, dumping of NTLM hashes, right? So it has multi-purpose and multi-stages. And that seems to be really the theme around some of the most recent attacks.
Wow, again, scary stuff. And the powerful part of software and the unfortunate part when it's turned against you is that they only have to write that code once and they can get it out there as many different ways and to do as many different things as possible. Pretty scary stuff. I'll turn to the panelists real quick and see what are you seeing as the threats right now today that you're kind of most concerned with? Philip, would you like to?
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to echo what Lucia said. Especially with targeted attacks. At the university level, we're seeing really specific attacks. They're peeling back our organization structure and handcrafting based on CVs or posted resumes, research, and they're figuring out our organization structure and saying, let me pretend to be the provost and send one of my deans a message or one of my faculty members a message, and they have enough information that it looks legitimate, and they're pulling that information. So obviously we're trying to balance the publication of research and that sort of thing with privacy, but it makes it really hard because again, to Lucia's point, it's a people problem. This is a social engineering, or at least what we're seeing is a social engineering problem for the most part. It happens to have a technology or a nasty back end to it, but you're getting in through the people. So
yeah, social engineering. It's a good time for that with all the uncertainty and change going on in the world too. Steve, how about you? Do you have a thought?
What we've seen is an uptick in phishing, obviously, and a lot of it coming from compromised third-party accounts. So emails coming in from trusted sources that are being compromised, obviously propagating malware trying to propagate malware into our internal systems. And the other thing we've seen, and actually just when Phil was talking, reminded me, I got another invite on LinkedIn from an individual who originally had just one connection, and I didn't accept and waited to see. And today it was up to 85. And normally I try and go in and identify people in the organization that may have accepted, but it's doing the same thing. And we see this in the past where they start connecting, mapping out reporting structures, starting to build that trust to try and figure out how and who to target in our organization. These accounts spring up and on a quite regular basis. And it's no surprise that they're taking this tack today as well.
That's scary stuff, and I bet it's happening all over the place. And one of the reasons, organizations like Proofpoint is including social media now in their defense, posturing and service offerings. Donna, how about you? Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
So we're seeing, generally speaking, the same threats, tactics, and techniques used by bad actors. The one that I didn't hear mentioned was ransomware. So ransomware has continued to propagate in the wild. And I think for me, what you'll see now and into the future is ransomware attacks both at the legacy systems as well as the cloud systems. As again, there is no environment. We're virtual, we're everywhere. So in this hybrid world, I think the ransomware attacks will continue just as we're seeing them continue today, in addition to what we've already heard with the business email compromise, the phishing, the farming, all of those kind of people-centric attacks.
It's certainly not slowing down, and with the deployment of artificial intelligence, both on the defense side and on the bad actor side, I think things are going to get really interesting in the near future as well. Well, it looks like we're getting pretty near the end of our time today, and I want to go quickly to the poll to see which one of the predictions got the most votes. It looks like it's a pretty close race today. We've got 6, 6, and 8 coming in, and the winner, though, it looks like it's going to go to Philip for permanent change in cloud/remote work. So, Philip, congratulations. They have crowned you the IT Psychic of Pennsylvania. What the honor is a huge honor to be bestowed here. And I want to say thank you to everyone in our audience today. Thanks so much for joining us. And keep an eye out in your inbox for a token of appreciation from today's sponsor, Proofpoint, and a special thank you to our esteemed panelists, Philip, Steve, and Donna. It was a pleasure having you on the panel, as well as Lucia. Thank you for taking the time to join us today as well. We owe you a debt of thanks for keeping us all safe and secure on the information superhighway. If you'd like to continue the chat, go ahead after the session has ended, but we'll wrap it up right there. I'll say I'm Joseph Wolfgram, and goodbye for now.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.